Now, to help us understand whether Kenya is ready to fully reopen schools amid the surge in COVID-19 infections, I am joined virtually by Jasper Ondimu, an education analyst and a teacher at Light Academy, Karen. Jasper, thank you for making time.
Thank you, Ondiro, for having me this evening.
Great. Let's just begin with your reaction to CS Magoha announcing that the academic calendar will fully resume on the 4th of January. What are some of your sentiments with regards to this announcement?
Thank you. For me, I welcome the decision of the CS to open schools on 4th January. It is long overdue. The children have stayed at home. We know the parents are ill prepared to handle these particular children when they are at home. The lives of private schools have been put at risk. We know that several teachers have not been on pay since March. We also do have other effects which span from the education sector. So it is a timely decision to open, though we know the aspect of preparation has not been dealt with. We have the few learners who are in school right now, the grade 4, class 8, and form 4. We've seen cases of COVID-19 surging across the schools, and someone can actually say that the country is not yet ready to open schools. It is time that we as educationists put pressure on the government to ensure that they put in the necessary mechanisms to protect the schools. Because as you heard professors there say that the government is committed to ensure safe reopening of schools. But if you go to some of these schools, you can be able to see there is nothing that is being done. The government has not released enough funds to school to ensure that the principals use those particular funds to be able to put in place the necessary mechanism for safe reopening to be actualized. We also have the private schools. KEPSA was saying that they needed a 7 billion stimulus package for them to prepare for reopening. The government went silent on that. So it is time that we educationists, you as the media, you help us to put the government into perspective, take it to task to ensure that the safe reopening that Professor Magoha keeps talking about is realized.
Great. Now, before we cross over to the mechanisms that need to be put in place, you've mentioned something very pertinent that also CS Magoha mentioned, that the government is committed towards a safe reopening. However, when we look at the state of education as is right now vis-a-vis the COVID-19 pandemic, Kabarnet Boys High School, 38 cases of COVID-19, and today, unfortunately, a Form 4 student from Lureko Secondary School in Western Region passed from COVID-19. What does this say about the state of preparedness in schools and how rather how brutal and how fragile it can be should a COVID-19 case break out in any of their schools? Jasper? I'll take that again, bearing in mind the fact that CS Magoha has constantly said that the government is committed towards a safe reopening of schools. However, today we saw news break that a student, a Form 4 student for that matter, from Lureko Secondary School in Mumias has passed away from COVID-19, and Kabarnet Boys recorded 38 cases of COVID-19. What does this say?
Thank you, Ondira. I'd lost you at some point. I trust that you can hear me right now.
Yes, go ahead.
It is quite unfortunate. Of course, we knew that when we were going to open schools, some of these issues were inevitable. But the preparations that have been put in place to ensure that we don't cause panic in schools. Yesterday, NHIF said that it was not going to take care of the treatment of COVID-19. So anybody can ask, so what is the government going to do to ensure that some of these children, some of these teachers who fall ill of COVID-19 are getting treated? And therefore, this is what some playwriters will call the theater of the absurd. And I hope that the death of this particular student is going to get the stakeholders on their shoes to ensure that the schools are prepared to handle some of these particular cases, because there's been a lot of panic. Even some educationists were actually saying that some of these figures, the manner they are being released to the public, it is not. I mean, for information purposes, it causes a lot of panic among the learners, among the parents. Some these particular students, especially the class 8 and the form 4s, they're about to do exams, and therefore the way that this particular information is being turned out, it is quite crucial. But it is really very sad that the life of our learner has been lost, and some of these things are easily preventable if the government supplied masks, ensured that there is water in schools. Some of these cases could be avoided. And therefore, it falls upon us as Kenyans to be able to think about the education of this particular country. And to a large extent, I think the government should just admit that they don't have funds and be able to put that particular burden to the parents to be able to supply, for example, masks, water. There are some parents who can just come together and construct a borehole in school, and that will be able to save the lives of those learners. So
Great.
I think I would like to ask the government to accept that there are no funds, and that burden should go to the parents. I know the parents are having rough time. Some of them have lost jobs, and some of them, their business are not doing well. But it is good for the government to come clean and say, hey, we don't have enough funds. COVID-19 has really ravaged the economy, and therefore we ask the parents to be able to effectively take charge of their learners. Yes.
Just I only have 30 seconds on the clock. From this reopening, what are some of the lessons that we've learned from this partial reopening of schools? And moving forward, ahead of 4th of January, what do we need to do to ensure that no other student dies of COVID-19, or we don't see the situation that is being witnessed at Kabarnet Boys High School?
Ondiro, it is very simple. The government should put in place the basics that the Ministry of Health has been advocating for. That is social distancing, wearing masks, and washing the hands on regular basis. The government should galvanize, should put resources to ensure that the kids are safe by ensuring that those particular protocols are enforced. Right now, we ought to be seeing the Ministry of Water constructing several boreholes across the country. We ought to see Rivertex making masks. We ought to see the government partnering with other stakeholders to ensure that they construct more classrooms. But as things are right now, the government seems to be putting a brave face when indeed things are really not right. So come January next year, we are going to see increase of cases of COVID-19 because the necessary mechanisms have not been put in place. That is why, as I wind up, I like to appeal to the media, Metropole TV and other media stations, to take to task the ministry to ensure that some of these basics are put in schools. You can imagine that the funds for this particular term.
Jasper, looks like I lost you there for a minute, but we were almost coming towards the tail end of our conversation. Thank you very much for making time.